Hi everyone, my name's Terry Scraggins, pronouns he, they. I am here representing Group 5, Amanda Juker, Randy Thompson, Courtney Green, Christelle Cochran, and myself in presenting on our diversity training development project. I'll be presenting under the assumption that I'm like presenting to the group of individuals we'll be providing this training to. Um, so please keep that in mind as we move along. And also, we decided to choose the refugee population. So our training that we will be administering to the staff at the agency we work at is titled Social Awareness and Compassionate Services for Refugees. So we know I think that it's safe to say that there are a decent number of people that have feelings in either direction regarding the refugee population. So our job here is to educate and inform. So we'll go ahead and get started. So the objectives of this training are that by the end of the training, participants should be able to identify implicit bias towards refugees, have increased awareness and understanding of cultural and social barriers that refugees may face, and have expanded their knowledge on the temporary services that refugees receive when they are relocated to the United States. So before we get started, I want to talk a little bit about like definitions and terms. So what is a refugee? A refugee is an individual who it was originally located outside of the United States. They are of special humanitarian concern to the United States. They are not firmly resettled in another country, and they're admissible to the United States. So there are a lot of different definitions of like what a refugee is, but I think that it's important to remember and acknowledge that a refugee that is coming to the United States is not from the United States, and also they are leaving their country because they are in a position where it's either stay where they are currently at and potentially face death or other implications, or leave and pack up everything that they have and leave the country of origin in order to essentially maybe save their lives. So when we're talking about the refugee population, I mentioned at the very beginning that people have strong feelings either way. A lot of the times, when we're talking about marginalized communities, we want to remember that a lot of it is grounded in like stereotypes and prejudice and bias and things like that. And so if we're going to talk about bias, we want to make sure that it's very clear as to what bias is. Bias is the thoughts or feelings towards a specific group or community. And specific to this training, though, we're going to talk about bias and implicit bias. So, bias of having thoughts or feelings about a certain population without even consciously knowing. And we're going to talk about implicit bias in relation to the refugee population. So, bias. Some examples of bias with specific to the refugee population are symbolic, realistic, safety, social functioning, prejudice, and altruistic. We found these on Psychology Today, and I'm not going to discuss everyone just for the sake of time, but I do want to talk about the some of the specific ones. So symbolic, the migrants' culture and religion being threatening to one's way of life. So that could be, you could think of like September 11th. There were people consistently that discriminated and held bias towards individuals from the culture that attacked the United States and the Twin Towers. Realistic, job availability and pay. So like, oh my gosh, like if people from out of the country come to the country, then we are going to lose jobs and our pay is going to go down. Safety, immigrants committing crimes, concerns about that, social functioning, creation of ghettos. So if a lot of people are moving here and they're not being productive members of society, then we are going to see an uptick in like ghettos. And then altruistic, which is like a nation failing to provide needed support for refugees. So an example of this could be like people that have feelings regarding why are we going to take people from another country into our country when we aren't even taking care of the people that are in our country, like veterans or people that are living in ghettos and things of that nature. So those are some examples of bias. Now we're going to transition to an activity. This is our first of two activities, and we're going to do the self-assessment test. So this test will take approximately 15 minutes. Everyone's going to fill it out. It's kind of like an inventory for an organization. I want everyone to answer it honestly. And then once you're done with it, we're going to address it and see how everyone scored. We're then going to kind of hash out some of the similarities and differences. And we may not get to all of it today because of the sake of the training, but we will have like a follow-up training moving forward just to kind of analyze what the outcome was of everyone's like self-assessment and organizational assessment test. Now, so pause, and I'll just be a student real quick. So we're going to fast forward and pretend as if we finished this test and talked about it. And then we're going to move on to some facts and statistics about the refugee population. So play. So I think that it is not super common for people to think like when a refugee leaves their country of origin and comes to the United States, where do they go, right? So I'm not going to go over this, but this is also in the handout that has been provided. Everyone should have one at their tables. And it just talks about the breakdown of like where are their country of origin, and what state are they living in. So now we're going to do another activity. It's going to be the privilege test. Essentially, we're going to do like an inventory of things that we don't even think about with regards to our privilege, or things in our life that automatically make us like in a better position than other people. I think it's really important to consider when we're talking about intersectionality, when we're working with like the refugee population or any marginalized population. It's so important to be conscious and aware of like our own privilege and the things that we possess that help get us further in life. And then that talks even further if we want to go another layer deep, and we talk about specific to refugee population, like they themselves could have their own internal conflict, and they could have their own intersectional qualities. For example, like what if there's a refugee that is relocated to the United States and they identify as gay or within the LGBTQ community, and the reason that they left their country is because they could be put to death for that because it's illegal. So this test is mostly just kind of like us checking some of the benefits and privileges that we have just by being born. Then we'll decompress, talk about that, move forward, and then we'll discuss barriers that refugees face. So there are a lot that need to be considered, and this isn't even all inclusive. They have to learn a new language. If they have children, they have to raise them, make sure that they're fed, make sure that they're cared for. They have cultural barriers, like, for example, walking on what side of the street, if you go up or down the stairs, like what way are you going, etiquette, things like that. And then many other things. I'm not going to go through all of these because I'm already over in time, and so my apologies for hanging in there. We have one more slide. This final slide is just a list of some resources because we want to make sure that people are prepared and equipped and able to deal with some of the struggles that they may experience when working with refugees, not from the refugees themselves, but some of the people that may not be educated or informed with regards to refugees. And these services are not all inclusive. We kind of just picked some. There's a few federal, and then there's also some that are specific to certain states. Specifically to like Idaho, I know that Catholic Charities of Idaho does a lot of work with the refugee population. There are also some churches and other organizations, but there are some federal ones. They're very limited and they are not forever. They typically have a set timeline and a fixed amount. There's requirements that need to be met to continue to receive those services. There's case management and things like that. So these are just some of them. There's also more information in your handout. And last but not least, here's our sources. There is also on your handout a lot of good information that could help you like get more educated and understand and be more culturally competent, because we're all social workers. That's what we're supposed to be doing, is being competent and being educated. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me or anyone else on the team. And thank you so much for coming to this training.